So I've been seeing a lot of videos covering, I guess, like a lot of people, or sorry, specifically game developers being very worried. And I guess this was the initial source with IGN. Baldur's Gate 3 is causing some developers to panic. And I've been enjoying Baldur's Gate 3 immensely. I'm not far into it, but still the character creation and everything so far, along with the options and all the dialogue and everything, it's definitely been a breath of fresh air. So let's see what this is all about.
Baldur's Gate 3 is taking the internet by storm. At its
Okay.
peak, a whopping 800,000 plus concurrent players were playing this weekend, catapulting it to the number 8 most played of all time spot. The gaming community has sung its praises, and it's incredibly refreshing to play a feature-complete game of this caliber on day one.
I don't know anyone who has not played it yet.
AAA game developers want you to know that this is rockstar level nonsense for scope.
I would not be surprised if this was more dev effort than the next 2 or 3 games in the genre combined. Maybe. I mean, you can tell that a lot of detail went into Baldur's Gate 3. It's rockstar level nonsense for scope. I think they're referring to the Rockstar Studios, the game developers, because Rockstar, very acclaimed, one of the very few amongst the Western developers, I feel like, that has stuck to pretty high quality for games very consistently throughout the decades. We have GTA, we have Red Dead Redemption. So yeah, only a few studio groups could even try this. Okay, I cannot wait to play, but this kind of effort likely won't be replicated this decade. Why not?
That it's foolhardy to set expectations.
Foolhardy. Okay.
Higher, and Baldur's Gate 3 should not be used as a raised standard to RPGs going forward.
Why not?
Why was the first response to defend the current state of AAA gaming as opposed to saying, hey, maybe we can learn a thing or two from Baldur's Gate 3 and make our game better for our customers?
You know, this reminds me a lot about I'm sure it's not every game developer. I'm sure maybe IGN or other people are just probably picking out the bad apples or just like the really bad takes from a few developers and kind of saying, oh, it's every game developer. But I do recall a similar situation with Elden Ring when that came out. I did see also personally, actually, I think it was about 6 game developers kind of saying, one of them was a UI and UX designer, and I think he said something along the lines of, don't ever tell me that players want a better UI or UX because, man, look at Elden Ring. Of course, it was jokingly said, but also at the same time, I think that there's a kernel of truth in that statement or the feeling of that statement where that person said it. I can kind of understand maybe you thinking you put a lot of your hard work and time into what you thought was going to be a great element of the game, but people didn't like it. But then when you look at another game that you think maybe didn't put enough effort into it as much as you did, you're just kind of like, you're probably a little ticked off. And I can understand that feeling, but probably saying it like that in public is probably not going to, turn out well. So yeah, kind of curious if it's the same thing here.
This all kicked off way back on July 8th, a lifetime ago by internet standards, I know, when a writer and BAFTA nominee, Xavier Nelson, took to Twitter to express concerns about Baldur's Gate 3, namely that fans would use Baldur's Gate 3 to apply criticism or a raised standard to RPGs going forward. My rebuttal is, why shouldn't customers have raised standards? Taking it a step further, why shouldn't some AAA developers raise their own standards? Are we really going to pretend that consumers shouldn't be a little upset right now and hoping for an improvement in the industry going forward? Rockstar just announced a $50 remake, conversion of the original Red Dead Redemption for the PlayStation 4 and Switch that has no mention of a 4K update, no mention of 60 FPS, and no mention of multiplayer support. The game came out 13 years ago, and the Xbox port does everything they're offering, and then some for free with your 360 copy. Go buy a brand new copy of the Game of the Year edition on Amazon right now for $30, and you're good to go. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, when released on PC, had furious fans, citing
I heard the
numerous
game was
problems
good. It's just performance issues were really bad for a lot of people.
getting the game to run, frequent crashes, and similar problems on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox. EA apologized and is still working to fix the issues. Destiny 2 just released a State of the Game blog saying, amongst other things, that they don't have the resources to release new ritual armor every season. But that same studio manages to create new armor sets in the shop for up to $20 a pop without fail every season. Diablo 4 unabashedly has several character skins priced at $20 each and just released their first season that had a patch that was so poorly thought out that the developers had to have an emergency live stream to apologize and have since begun working to revert those changes.
We don't plan on doing a patch like this ever again.
Yeah, watch this.
Okay, you need a more comparable RPG example of why fans are heralding Baldur's Gate 3 as a breath of fresh air? Look no further than Mass Effect Andromeda, which was widely panned.
Sorry, my face is tired from dealing with everything.
Okay.
Or Cyberpunk 2077 that made promises about last-gen game consoles that it couldn't keep. It took CDPR almost a year to get that all sorted out. I'll make this as clear as possible to contend.
I think a lot of gamers, I think a lot of people are very tired of, I talked about this as a reason why Starfield is probably going to be a huge success. I think the current landscape of gaming outside of really good games that are, of course, not live service games. And I'm talking about the landscape of the games right now that a lot of people play. They're live service games, and it's a very stagnant landscape. I think it's a very miserable landscape at a lot of points in time. It feels like to me, as an MMO player or even just a live service gamer, whether you're talking about like things like Warzone, Diablo, ESO, Final Fantasy 14, whatever, Destiny 2, and this, as I've been seeing a lot on Twitter, I think it feels like to me, at least, the design of the game and the systems within the game feel like they're not intended for you to invest into the game, to stick with the game. It feels like a lot of the live service games tend to just throw things at you to see if you will maybe come back or like treat it as a seasonal thing. And I get that there's like a type of gamer for that, where occasionally you'll play League of Legends or Valorant or whatever from time to time. But I feel like for a lot of games where it feels like where the company or the developers at least want you to invest in time and like, I guess, emotion into their product, it also feels like the product is also trying to sell you things, trying to treat you as more of a customer than the gamer. I think, honestly, people are very tired of that. I think that's a huge part of the reason why Baldur's Gate 3 is a huge success, because it doesn't really try to give you, I don't think it even has a cash shop or anything. And it's been such a long time since I've played a game that doesn't have a huge monetization aspect to it. Even for games that are not supposed to be, long-term multiplayer. So I don't know.
Contextualize how fans are feeling. It feels like money has become more important than the core experience for fans. That's why Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, and even The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom are being widely celebrated. So what is up with the excuses? A game came along that is amazing, is selling well, is being praised by developers and fans alike, and the response is, well, we can't do that. Well, sweet. If that doesn't get me hyped for Mass Effect 4, I don't know what will. Xavier's tweet was well-intentioned, and he went on to add a lot of important context. But I think it misses the perspective of the consumer. We don't know anything about game design or how hard it is. We just know that Destiny is deleting hundreds of dollars worth of expansions when they feel like it, that Diablo is constantly reminding us to buy skins in their store, and most PC ports have been abysmal lately. Remember, that tweet was made nearly a month before Baldur's Gate 3 blew up, and it was still contentious with fans speaking up about their frustrations and developers chiming in to say what felt like, game development is hard, you don't get it, be quiet. Baldur's Gate 3 is...
To be fair, I think a lot of people do unfairly attack developers when it is definitely more the corporate side that needs to be looked at by a lot of the consumers or gamers in this case. There's definitely a disconnect between people who make games and people who play the games. And I don't think I think it'd be very hard to educate everybody on what goes into game development. I think at a certain point too, not a lot of people care, which is a little unfortunate, but at the same time, I get what you're saying. Like,
it's a game from a large, passionate studio that refuses to add microtransactions.
What is this? No, there are no in-game purchases in our game. This is Baldur's Gate 3. We believe in providing a complete and immersive gaming experience without the need for additional purchases. Enjoy the game to its fullest without any additional cost for microtransactions. Man, that is so good. Like, that's so good. Like, I don't know what to say. It's just so good. Like, this is such, again, I feel like a breath of fresh air. I feel like it's just something so simple. And I get it. I know, like, companies like Blizzard or whatever need to make profit, but I feel like they would make more. Or just maybe not more, but a consistent income or something. Or just, I feel like the loyalty of your consumers at a certain point far more important than the profits you get long term.
Gave players
that's such a cool, like, I don't know,
early access so they could address any problems that arose before launch, and it's taking Steam charts by storm. So why should fans not use that as a gold standard of how to do it right? And why would a AAA studio not look at it and say, hey,
I agree,
maybe cramming microtransactions into our game isn't a good look? When Mass Effect 4 comes out, I don't want to see a $20 Liara skin.
Absolutely.
And I hope that its performance is tested across all platforms before release. Am I in the wrong for not wanting microtransactions and a stable video game at launch?
Absolutely
Credit
not.
where credit's due now. There have been some really good examples of AAA games like the Dead Space remake and the Resident Evil 4 remake coming to mind.
I played both these games. They were really good. I was actually really surprised by the Dead Space remake. I think they did a fantastic job. I was worried about them giving Isaac a voice for the original, but I was like, they did it really well.
Both of which have been massive successes for EA and Capcom. Vampire Survivors came along and took the internet by storm last year. Do I need to bring up Elden Ring again? But that tweet blew up in the development sphere, and frankly, the pushback is just ridiculous. Developers should be looking at what Baldur's Gate 3 did and trying to replicate where they can, not jumping up to defend games that are cramming in practices that fans are getting fed up with. And make no mistake about it, these decisions impact game design. Many games are utilizing battle passes and player engagement as a metric of success. For a player, that means more grindy missions. That means more reminders to stop in the shop. It means a boring grind because keeping players engaged is a key metric.
Yeah.
Many of the people who came out to talk about why Baldur's Gate 3 shouldn't be the new standard have since walked back those statements, and I'm glad. Because if the industry can't take a good hard look at what's going wrong, why fans reacted the way they did to Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3, and then make impactful changes, we're screwed. Also, people seem to be using the fact that Larian is a big studio against them, the fact that they had a long development cycle against them.
Big studio? What?
Really?
I heard it only has like 300, 400 people.
Blizzard is also a huge studio with over 8,500 employees across several offices.
Okay.
They credited every employee at Blizzard in the release of Diablo 4. Bungie is a huge studio with over 1,552 employees across several offices. BioWare is a huge studio with over 500 employees across several offices. And Larian is also a large studio with over 400 employees across several offices. All of them have established beloved IPs with a ton of lore to pull from. All of them have a lot of money to make video games. And all of them had a long time to make anything they wanted to make. To say Baldur's Gate 3 is successful because it's aligned with Dungeons and Dragons is insanity. You think
is that an actual argument people are making? I'm not really a big Dungeons and Dragons player, or I've never really engaged in too much of it, but I've been enjoying Baldur's Gate 3 a lot. I love the whole thing. I love how they basically made it Dungeons and Dragons, but very visual, right? Because obviously for the tabletop Dungeons and Dragons, you have to use your imagination. I just have never really gotten a group for it, a consistent group for it, so I never really got into it. But man, if you know what I mean, like, I don't know if that's an argument though.
100,000 Steam players are playing a game called Baldur's Gate 3 because of Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, no.
No, it's clearly gone far beyond that audience. I don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't know this game had anything to do with Dungeons and Dragons. And you know why I'm playing it? Because I like good games with a heavy focus on storytelling and bears. But anyway,
and impact. I feel like there's a lot of games out there where the player impact is not felt really. It just isn't. And of course, I feel like the live service game feature at a certain point, but there are also games that aren't live service that I just feel like doesn't hold my attention. Doesn't really get me to be like, okay, I'm going all in on this.
Wasn't all doom and gloom from the development side. Thank you, Juno Bleeze, formerly of Riot, for jumping in and echoing exactly what I'm saying here.
I can't disagree with this one more. Whenever a game disrupts the industry and delights players beyond expectations, absolutely should raise the industry and genre standards, regardless of why and how.
I can't disagree with this one more. Whenever a game disrupts the industry and delights players beyond expectations, it absolutely raises industry and genre standards regardless of why and how. We should look at the Larian's success story and ask ourselves, how are we going to make our games better and create the next games that shake up the industry? Players should and must always expect more from us, never less. Thank you. I implore AAA devs to look at these games that are being celebrated and look at your pipeline to see why the consumer is getting frustrated about the experience I outline in this video. And obviously try and make an improvement, because telling me how hard it is when you're breaking profit and revenue records isn't a super compelling argument from the customer's perspective. Is Baldur's Gate 3 an outlier? Yes, but I for one wish it could become the standard, and being told to shut up because I don't know game design doesn't feel super constructive. But hey, I'm just some idiot on the internet who doesn't know anything about game design. I guess I'll just go buy my horse armor and call it a day. Enjoy your $20 on top of your $100 for the collector's edition, on top of your $15 for the battle pass. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, because I get why you're frustrated, and it's really frustrating to see people not saying, hey, maybe we could learn a thing or two from Larian. I'm enduring Baldur's Gate 3, and I hope game development continues to grow from where it is today. I hope you do too. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more on all things gaming, keep it right here on IGN.
I feel like there was a little bit of hyperbole in some parts, but at the same time, I do agree with the sentiments. I think this is actually one of the very few times I agree with something that's from IGN. But yes, I would say the core sentiments of people who feel like games are just not for the player are definitely valid. I just agree with that so much. I just really am tired. I really am, of all the microtransactions, of all the weird, and I feel like very restrictive practices game developers have to put into their product or their project. Like he briefly mentioned earlier in the video where not game developers specifically, but the companies measure their success through specific aspects of player activity. So MMOs in particular do this a lot, where they tout not just account, like how many people created their account or how many people played, whatever. They also look at how many people played when, so events, and how long they played for, not continuously. Like, for example, if you play MMO for like 5 years straight, they're not looking at you. They're looking at the retention rate for the things that they are putting into the game, whether that be a cash shop or whether that be a in-game event that coerces you to a cash shop, but that's a different story. But so yeah, I definitely think I'm going to, for the most part, I'm going to kind of ignore the whole focus on some game developers having bad takes, because I feel like the whole focus should be here, as he said, at the end is, as consumers and as players, we should be expecting games to be fun, to not be joyless. So yeah, I don't know. Of course, this is I feel like a nuanced subject as far as which games do this and which games don't. But in general, I do feel like a lot of people's experiences with gaming right now, it has to do with this current landscape of live service games. And the live service games just aren't holding up. And it just feels like you're moving from game to game. and that's fine too. But you're not moving from game to game because you want to play all those games. You're just kind of moving from game to game to look for something to enjoy, and it's not a really good feeling after you do it for a while. So yeah, I think it's a good video for the most part.